talk for a couple of seconds just to cover the bit where you never know if Facebook cuts off some critical business information. And I believe we are actually now live. So I'm just going to say hello to a friend of the podcast, Jason Franciosa, who's a really successful business builder. And I think is succeeding at that in a really difficult time, which is what we're all facing: downturn or recession coming, or whatever you want to call it, hyperinflation. I guess not hyperinflation yet. It's just back to the 70s type of inflation. So in that context, it's great to have somebody who can show us the way forwards to, not only survive but thrive in these times. So Jason, warm welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to go live with this, but most of the time what happens is that nobody says anything during the live, and that's fine, but you're free to comment and ask any questions as long as they're relevant to the topic at hand. So should you start an e-commerce business, that's not really what we're asking. And should you sell retail arbitrage, that's kind of not what we're here to talk about. But we're here talking about brand building and how to deal with keeping your price up, and then how to keep the costs low, and the difference being, of course, the profits. That is definitely the topic of the day. So if you've got anything to say about that, please do put something in the comments and we can weave it into the show. But that said, we will record our podcast sort of live as we normally do. So Jason, you ready to rock and roll on this? Excellent. I know you sent the family out.
Yeah, let's do it.
The background, ready to rock and roll. Right, here we go. All right, camera back to me.
Important things.
Yeah, the important things. And here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast. I'll just do that again. All right, let's start again. Let's try and get a clean start. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon and e-commerce sellers. Today we are talking to a powerhouse of brand building, Jason Franciosa, who has built his brand Element 26, I believe is iron, for the sports market. So we are talking today on that topic, which is how are we going to build a brand in a downturn. So Jason, warm welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And so quite a topic. Tell us a little bit about your background first, because for those who haven't heard you before, we've had you on the show before. You're quite well known in the seller community. I know you're working with thecapitalism.com and Ryan Daniel Moran, so quite a big name out there. But for those who haven't come across you, who's Jason and what do you do?
Yeah, of course. So I got started in this e-commerce journey almost by accident. Originally from Massachusetts, in the United States. Graduated University of Massachusetts with a business degree. Spent 4 years in the military as an officer. When I got out of the military, I started my first entrepreneurial journey by accident. I met somebody who wanted to start a business in Colombia doing contracts for drones, and I had previous experience with drones in the military. So moved down to South America, spent 2 years down there learning all about how business should not be done. And started another company with a friend of mine who was at MIT at the time. Went through a bunch of more formal training and incubator courses, went through MIT's Fuse program. We applied for and got into Stanford Ignite, got funding through MIT Sandbox, and it was a software company. Anyway, that didn't work out either because we did not build a brand. We didn't focus on the customer. We were just product focused. And that you'll find, I think, is the recurring theme as to why most businesses fail, is all they do is obsess over the product. And they don't understand that a business's entire purpose is to serve the customer, not the owner. So actually, Ryan Moran at the time, so back in 2017, he had an ad for a webinar, basically explaining this process. And to me, like a light bulb went off, like this is what was missing in all my previous ventures. And really just the way that business was taught, even at these, extremely reputable academic facilities where, their primary business model is find a great idea from some engineer, pair it with one of the business students, get him a bunch of capital, and then everybody else does all the work. So it was quite a path to get started. But then once we started down this path and really decided to focus on the customer and the person and developing products that are unique for them and are differentiated in the marketplace that solve a specific problem for the person, that's when we started to see really good success. So it's been 5 years now. We should do over 8 figures this year. And potentially selling next year. It all depends on marketing conditions and how the rest of this year goes and everything else. But we love what we do. We love serving the people that we serve. And if we have to do this another 10 years, that's fine by me.
Wow, that's you packed a heck of a lot in. I love the fact that you started a company or you're part of an entrepreneurial venture in South America. How random is that? I guess I was thinking that for people based in the States, South America is going to become a commoner place to do business than it has been in the last couple of decades, I guess, as the world changes. But yeah, that's certainly different. And yeah, wow, so many lessons. What would you say is the single most important lesson? You've already highlighted focusing on the product and forgetting about the customer. Were there other things that you think you learned from your mistakes with the previous startups that you've changed in your successful e-commerce business?
I mean, I really think it comes down to that. If you truly understand the person you're serving, then you can make much better decisions because you're making the decisions that the customer wants. And then it's an easy choice for them to choose your brand versus the, potentially hundreds of other options they have out there, right? If you're just trying to copy, like at this point, our weightlifting belt on Amazon has been copied multiple times, but no one is nearly as successful as we are because they're just copying, right? They're not providing any unique value in the marketplace. So it's so important to have some sort of unique value in the marketplace that's meaningful to the person you serve and the community that you're trying to expand. In my opinion, the worst thing you could do is just try and be another white label company because then you just end up having to compete on price. And competing on price is never fun.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's brings us really to the heart of today's conversation, which is okay. So the world is changing somewhat. I mean, we used to worry about the competition all the time, and now we've got to worry about the competition, of course, but we have to worry about the consumers deciding not to spend money increasingly as they are feeling the pinch and the cost of living crisis, whichever way you want to put it. So, in that context, what do you think we need to do to build a defensible brand that's actually going to be, survive this situation?
Right, so in order to survive, you have to have a value proposition to the customer that is greater than your competition. And there's much more to a value proposition than just price. Even in a downturn, when people are economically challenged, they're still going to purchase the item or stick with the company that they believe provides the most perceived value, not simply the lowest dollar amount. This is so important because if you're not providing a large perceived value to the customer, as in much more than just the product that they're receiving, then you're always competing on price, and then you're going to be trying to compete with your manufacturer. You're never going to win, right? Especially in a marketplace like Amazon, or if you're selling anywhere where all of your competitors are stacked up right against you, and they can simply see who has the most reviews and who has the lowest price, and that's all they made a decision on. You have to get away from that. And if you don't, then it's gonna be a very difficult time. And again, you can provide that in multiple different ways. You can, but in my opinion, it starts with a really good product that's differentiated and unique in the marketplace. Because if you start with that, they already have a reason to consider you versus your competitors. If you have just a generic product with just your logo on it, you're starting off behind, right?
Yeah.
So I think it starts with having a really good product that's differentiated, unique in the marketplace, and then you build on top of everything else. So you have the brand recognition, which you can get through multiple different ways, and that's all of your off Amazon marketing, right? That's all of your influencers you're working with, all the different news outlets you're working with, the competitions that you're showing up to, or the events, like whatever industry you're in, going there, meeting people in person. Because the majority of sales in general are referral marketing, as in someone bought your product, they love it, and they tell their friends, and their friends are now in the market for that, so they just go with their friend recommended, right? So then providing the best customer experience as you possibly can allows you to really double down on that referral marketing, which is going to have a much higher conversion rate than spending an extra $50,000 a month on Facebook ads. So it really comes down to the fundamentals, right? Build a strong brand that people want to choose and love to represent. Have unique products in the marketplace that have a unique selling proposition. So you're not just copying all of your competitors or throwing a logo on whatever's. Alexa's listening. all your competitors are doing, then you're stuck competing on price, and then provide such a great experience to the customer that they want to go out and recommend your brand to all their friends.
Great. Do you need to kind of shut Alexa up? Okay, she's gone. Okay, it's getting involved here. Amazon's everywhere. You can't move for it, even on a podcast. So let's just get into how to do these things then. So you're saying, okay, get a differentiated product and then build a really strong brand and recognition. So I guess the differentiated product is hard work. But you guys have got a very successful way of doing that. So can you tell us more about how to do that in a way that your customers are going to care about, rather than, as you said, getting product centered? Because you've pointed out that was already a danger. I see marketers or entrepreneurs tend to split into two halves for me. One is they're a bit overly product centered and they're good at creating products but not so great at marketing. And then the others tend to be the other way around. So how do you bring those two together in the actual product design, first of all?
I mean, they're complementary, in my opinion. If you have unique differentiating factors in your product, that is your marketing material, right? And then when people utilize your product, so you have influencers using it, or you're, I mean, just think about if you're going to sell it in person. I think we try to overcomplicate e-commerce because it gets too data focused. Everyone gets obsessed with the numbers, like, oh, my metrics are this and that. And how do I get my, average order value up to this much and retention rate? But if you step away from the numbers for a second and imagine yourself trying to sell your product to somebody in person, what are the things you're going to highlight? What's going to get them excited? What's going to get that in, the most emotional reaction? And I highly recommend that everybody does that. Like, take your product and go sell it to someone in person. Go to an event. And you'll see what things actually bring out an emotional response, what things bring out excitement. And those things is exactly what you want to focus on in your marketing. It's going to convert 100 times better than you spending 4 months looking at heat maps and split testing 45 different landing pages. It's like, if a customer is excited about the product because it has a unique factor that your competition doesn't have, they're not going to care what color the button to buy is, right? So e-commerce people in general, I think, just get way too obsessed with the 2% optimization, and they should be focused on the 90% optimization, which is figuring out what is your unique factor in the marketplace, how do I portray this to the customer in a meaningful way, and how do I make it fun and exciting for them to purchase my products and be part of my journey?
Great advice. Great advice. I really like the fact that you bring it down to basics, because in the end, humans are the people buying, not computers. I mean, one day maybe computers will buy on behalf of humans, and that will get more complicated, but it's certainly not what happens at the moment, as far as I know, unless Alexa's just, buying stuff on your behalf right now. Who knows? But what have you guys done personally, without revealing obviously trade secrets or helping your competitors? I'm not thinking they're probably going to be listening to podcasts anyway. But what have you done to actually implement that? Give us some concrete examples of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so our first product, the lifting belt, the big problem that we focused on was, we didn't want a thick, bulky leather belt with buckles and everything else. Like, it's not what we wanted. It's not what our customer wanted. So we wanted a belt that was practical. My business partner is a doctor of physical therapy, so he was able to tap into his experience, both practicing and being a competitive weightlifter, and his education, to really understand what it is that a weightlifting belt does. And there's really no benefit to having like some thick, bulky thing, other than like some people just prefer it, right? But the big problem with the nylon-based belts is the Velcro will wear out over time. So it's seen as high risk if you're doing like a big heavy lift and that Velcro pops open. You have 100, 200, 300 pounds of intra-abdominal pressure being created. That pops open, all of a sudden you're now unstable and potentially have an injury. So we solved this problem by actually looking at multiple different ways to secure that strap. And we came up with what we call our now trademark term, the self-locking buckle. By doing this, we essentially solved a major problem that people have with this type of product in the marketplace. We were the first one on Amazon to do it. I mean, to be fair, the company Chic actually had it on a patent in the 80s, even though the patent wasn't focused on that, but it's not anything new. What we did, we put it on the type of belt that we wanted. So a 4-inch uniform profile, which is what the people that we were focused on, which was the CrossFit athlete at the time, we still do, but we're expanding much more now. They wanted a lightweight, comfortable, competition ready. So it had to be 4-inch uniform profile with these security features. And that's what we brought to market. And we're the first ones on Amazon to do it, the first ones to really focus on that specific point. And it allowed us to go from, brand new company not starting out to the top 10 bestsellers, very quickly. And now we're number one by a long shot, even with our competitors doing everything they can to attack us. One of the previous number one belt got bought out by one of the huge aggregators. So they have literally millions of dollars. And they're doing everything in their power to try and surpass us right now with price cuts and lightning deals and coupons and everything in preparation for Prime Day. And there's still hundreds of sales behind us. We do 0 discounts, 0 promotions. We don't play those games. So having a unique differentiating factor. Oh, and they have more reviews than we do, so it's not a review thing. And the review average is actually higher as well. So you don't have to have the most reviews. You don't have to have the highest review count or the review average in order to win. You have to have the best offer and express as to why that is the best product for the average customer or the customer that you're serving. And then they will choose you over the competition every time.
Yeah. I guess one thing that strikes me is two simple things. One is that you guys care, because I know that you're a pretty serious athlete, and obviously I didn't know that your business partner was competitive weightlifter, but that makes sense that he would know exactly how to design a weightlifting belt. Plus, number two, expertise, proper expertise, like he's got a doctorate. They don't give that out at the door of Amazon seminar rooms, right? So you can't fake that. And I guess the downside of that is anyone listening who doesn't have a doctorate is going to be going, that sounds super difficult to get. I guess the upside is that nobody else can really replicate that. So for those who don't have doctorates out there but do sort of care about an area, and let's assume we're talking to people with established businesses, but they need to hone their game rather than start from scratch, what would your advice be to them to try to emulate what you're doing without necessarily having a doctorate in the house?
Right, so think outside the box. The biggest challenge I see most business owners that can't grow or scale have is they try and replicate what other people are doing. You have to come out with your own unique offer into the marketplace. So when you're trying to do product development, like how can I be different in a meaningful way? You need to be able to communicate with your customers or your avatar, even if it's not you. You don't have to have a doctorate. You don't have to be your ideal avatar. You have to sit down and listen to what their concerns are, or listen to what they say, because they're not going to give you the answer. Very rarely is a customer or your ideal avatar going to know what the next innovation is going to be. That's going to be the big breakthrough. It's your job to come up with that, but you can piece that together by listening to enough different people talking about the specific product you're trying to innovate on. And you'll start to see recurring themes of what the common problems are. And then you have to start thinking, okay, well, how can I solve this problem? Right? So you have to think outside the box. You got to do a little bit of work. I see too many entrepreneurs, quote unquote entrepreneurs or business owners, that are just looking for the easy way out, and they want someone to hand them the answer. And that's not how you win. The way that you win is you have to think outside the box, come up with some innovative solutions, and bring those to the marketplace, right? So that's good and bad. It's good because good ideas can come from anybody. You don't need a doctorate. You don't need a massive amount of experience to come up with a great idea. It's bad because it's a lot more difficult than just copying what someone else is doing. But I just don't see very many brands doing well. And I mean, there's some success stories, right? There are some people who are just really good at marketing, and that's how they're able to get by with just a pure white label of whatever's everyone else is buying, right? And it does work from time to time, but to me, that's so much more rare. And then if you're trying to actually have a good valuation of the business, if you don't have any unique, your only unique, if your only unique selling proposition in the marketplace is you're really good at marketing, they can't buy the business from you without you.
Yeah,
right.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's the one thing that strikes me. And the other one is that just because you've got to this point, the aggregators aren't stupid. I mean, it's a rather strange way to value a business as a multiple of the trailing 12 months, because I mean, it's discounted future cash flows that we should really be buying. As Jeff Bezos himself said, if we have a choice of business valuation, we'll take the discounted future cash flows. And future cash flow for something indefensible isn't going to be very good, is it? And I don't think that a lot of chickens are going to come home to roost. Talking of which, the aggregators who bought your competitors, I think they're not the only people who've done something like that. And there's a lot of money riding on it. And the reason that they they're not stupid people. They can do finance, but what they don't get is e-commerce in their bones, I think, and that's why you're beating them, isn't it? Because you really get your customers in a way they don't. So I'm
Well,
with you on
they're
that.
buying a business based on metrics, like you
Hmm.
said, and
Yeah,
they're not understanding that the customer is not only looking at, their business metrics.
yeah, right.
They
It's been
think they figured out
overly
the Amazon
clever.
platform because it's all about just reviews and ranking, but there's a lot more to it than just reviews. Like, in order to get reviews and rankings, there's a lot more to it, I should say.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think what you put your finger on today is just sort of blowing out of the water this obsession with metrics, which is a very good counterbalance to just being intuitive and instinctive, I suppose. And certainly aggregators I've spoken to are very, very analytical, and they employ a lot of very clever people. But what they don't have is your depth of understanding, and in a sense, a depth of respect for the customers that I'm getting from you as well. That you're really, really focused on solving a problem for them, and that comes across. And I guess it probably comes across to your customers on Amazon, and that's in a way, you make it sound so simple. If only it were this simple. But I mean, yeah, it's humbling
yes.
stuff. Let's talk a little bit about downturns and the situation that we're in, just in case that has any influence on what your advice would be. So, what I've got written down from our notes from our pre-call is you said the importance of understanding macroeconomics. It's not complicated. That's what I wrote down. So, tell me a bit about your view of macroeconomics and why it's not complicated.
I mean, so the current situation is fairly simple. The economy shut down, supply was completely constrained. In order to avoid going into a depression, central banks across the world printed a ton of money. Supply is still constrained, but you have a massive amount of demand, right? So now we have inflation. So the Fed has to bring inflation down because inflation hurts most members of society much more um, than anything else, essentially, right? So that's all we're saying, right? The Fed's getting aggressive with increasing interest rates to bring demand down and hopefully rebalance supply and demand, and then inflation comes back down and everyone's happy. So I guess that's what I mean when it's simple. Now, in terms of doing well in that environment, to me, this is where you can really scale because everyone's going to be suffering, but you also can have a much higher return on investment when you find the channels that are working because it gets less expensive to market. So if you have a product or a business that can convert well during these times, your Facebook ad cost just went down significantly. Your Amazon ad cost just went down. Your Google ad cost just went down because less other businesses are willing to spend in an environment that is economically challenging, right? And then if you want to look at building a brand outside of just paid advertising, looking at picking up influencers. As businesses start to struggle, they're going to start cutting contracts with influencers. But now you can start looking to pick those people up, right? So I think during these downturns, you should look at it as an opportunity and just be very careful with understanding where your capital is going. Your job as a business owner is a capital allocator, right? Where do we put the funds that we have coming in to get the most return on the amount of money that we are putting out, right? But in a downturn, you also have a lot more opportunity of where you can place those funds because a lot of your competitors are backing off. So as long as you're doing it intelligently, and you're making sure that you're not just wasting money, and just throwing it, down the drain, this can be a huge opportunity for any brand.
Amazing. Yeah, I like that thinking. Taking 11, not just taking 11, making lemonade. It's more fundamental than that. I think you have a very, yeah, what's the word? Very confident view of the world, which is great. Very refreshing. It makes a change from everyone sort of sitting there, holding their head in their hands, saying, "My costs are going up. I can't get my stuff from China." Any other questions that I should have asked you? It's a huge area, but I want to keep it sort of simple because people are busy and you're busy, and I want people to, have bite-sized takeaways and a bit of an injection of the Jason confidence that we're getting here. What other questions should I ask you?
I mean, I don't think there's any reason not to be confident. Like, I don't think anyone thinks like this is going to be the end of the world, right? And I know it might feel like it as things are downturning or as you go through struggles, and so, but it's just very short term, And to be honest, like when COVID hit, we watched our sales get cut in half from one day to the next, right? I mean, I think it was like it's March 12th or something. I forget the exact date. But literally from like Sunday to Monday, our sales just got cut in half at that point. And that was freaky. But then a year later, our business was double what it was the previous year, right? So just, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have emotion, but also think long term and realize that this is just a bump in the road. And as long as you stay focused on using the resources that you have in the most efficient way possible, as in getting the highest ROI on the money you're spending, or my personal favorite analogy is the fruit tree, right? Go for the lowest hanging fruit first. Where can you get the highest ROI for your time, money, capital, and stress? And then just keep going up that tree, as you start, going through all the highest opportunity, highest ROI opportunities. If you stay focused on that, like, that's all you have to do.
Excellent. You make it sound all very simple, and maybe it is. Maybe we're all overcomplicating it. I certainly am quite good at overcomplicating things. I'm not the only one that I know. But anyway, we're going to talk about specifically cost reduction, because obviously that's quite a big thing that people are aware of at the moment with the situation they're in. But for the moment, I just want to say a big thank you for such a simple and yet profound insights. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So cost reduction.
Oh, sorry. I
thought
going
you
to
wanted to
record
start.
that as a separate
Oh, okay.
podcast.
Yeah,
That's okay. Just saves on the post production.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, where I'm talking to Jason Franciosa of Element 26, which is the element of iron, which is obviously in the iron game, I believe is the name for weightlifting, and that's your first product, the weightlifting belt. I presume that's the connection. So we are talking today about how to deal with the downturn in e-commerce, but particularly today focused on cost reduction. So Jason, welcome back. Thank you so much for your wisdom. You gave us a big shot in the arm in the first episode, which if you haven't listened to this, do go and have a listen. All about really brand building in a defensible way, so that you keep the sales going in a downturn, that the customers have loyalty to you and your products. So more nuts and bolts focused, I guess, today. Cost reduction. We've all got our cost of goods sold, shipping, and ad spend, I suppose, are the big three, aren't they, normally? So what's your approach to cost control when things feel like they're spiraling out of control?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so of course, your first step is to reduce costs, but then it's also important to have pricing power, right? If you are trying to compete on price, well, now and your costs are going up, you're going to be out of business very quickly. So as we just spoke about, it's so important to have a solid brand with differentiated products. And I'm not going to go through it again, but when you have that, you have pricing power and you can raise your prices. We've continuously risen our prices over the last few years, increasing our margins. And as our costs go up, it's less of a concern because we've more than offset any cost increases for shipping, cost of goods sold, advertising spend, everything else by simply raising our prices. And we're able to do that because we have a set of products, a brand in a community that's willing to pay more than they would pay for our competitors, right? So, I mean, that's number one, of course. In terms of getting your costs down, a lot of times it just comes down to negotiation, right? So if you're talking about cost of goods sold, can you either A, renegotiate your current supplier, or B, do you have other manufacturers on tap that can produce a similar quality product at a lower price? And not being attached to your single manufacturer, if you can control that. For us, for the majority of our products, we actually have a manufacturer dedicated just to us. Like, we are their only customer. So anytime you see a knockoff of our product in the marketplace, it is not the same product because our factory only produces for us. And we have very high standards as to what comes out of that factory. So quality control is very strict. We have a US team that lives in the country that we manufacture, ensuring that everything is going smooth. And we have very good negotiating power because if we go away, they have no revenue. So we're able to negotiate our costs very powerfully because we are their primary customer, right? Of course, we want them to be successful too. So, we're more than willing to ensure that they're running a successful business because we don't want to lose them, even though we have multiple other options. At the same time, they're much more willing to work with us, not only on cost, but also on quality. We're able to, almost every 2 or 3 months, we're making some change to all of our products just to improve the quality overall as we get feedback from the customers. And that just continually increases customer loyalty because, they might buy the product a second time 6 months later and they're like, oh, wow, this is actually a better product than I bought last time. So they're like, well, I want to keep buying from this brand because I know I'm always going to have the latest and greatest and the best product in the market. That continual improvement.
So how do you structure that, by the way? Do you call that the same product, but you just change the images? Do you and the specifications? Do you call that like version 2.0, or do you launch it as a new SKU?
So, I mean, there's multiple different things happening here. Like for our belts, I mean, there's changes every 6 months, at the maximum, usually every 3 months, but it's not a complete change. It's not like I'm not creating a new product. It might be an adjustment as to, the width of our Velcro, the stitchings that we're doing, or adding additional stitchings, or maybe we change the quality of the Velcro. Like recently, our Velcro, we found a manufacturer that had a higher quality Velcro than the one that we were using previously. So it'll last longer and be stronger than 9 yards. So we made that change. That's nothing I'm going to advertise to the customers, right? I'm not even going to bring it up. We'll just know that we have less issues, right? At one point we had single stitching lines, and then we brought it to double stitching lines. We add additional stitching lines in different areas. So there's continual improvement with the product itself. And again, having a factory that's dedicated just to us, we can do that at very minimal cost because they're basically just charging us costs for those changes. But we get a product that is significantly better than anyone who's copied us. And then the funny part is, like, someone will come out with a copy of one of our products, and we'll see it somewhere, or we'll purchase it just to see what's going on. I'm like, oh, this is the version from like 3 years ago. Like, this is just an old, outdated product. It's like, good luck. So a big fan of that. But in terms of, again, going back to cost, and then the other thing, of course, is your advertising, right? And that's where we go back to the return on your investment. So are you doing experimental advertising that does not have a high ROI, where you can use those same funds to go into something that is working much better for you, right? And then starting to think outside the box. Where can you get in front of the customers who are ready to make a purchase as much as possible, as opposed to going after a cold audience, right? Where are people actively searching to buy this? Can I get in front of them there? Who are they listening to, or who are they watching when they make the purchasing decision, when they're trying to find out which product to buy? Like, how can I be placed on, on those videos or whatever it may be, right? So again, thinking outside the box, putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, going through their mental process of what are they looking for when they're purchasing your product? Why are they going to choose product X versus product Y? And then how can I be the one that they choose every time because of the multiple different aspects? Excuse me one second. But yeah, I mean, it's not super complicated. It's just continuously improving, increasing things that have a high ROI, decreasing things that don't have a high ROI, and then putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and really understanding their thought process, their journey, what they're looking for.
Great. These are fantastic principles. Now, I'm going to ask, I guess, for some specifics, because people always write down names. I've noticed in mastermind meetings, people will write down the names of URL or of a service and specific kind of platforms, even though that's probably not the value, but I kind of have to ask. So where are you finding at the moment your particular customers are, finding and you're getting a good ROI?
I mean, for us, we have at this point so many different channels. I mean, of course, Amazon, but doubling down on what's working on Amazon. We've experimented with a lot of different. Amazon is continuously growing their advertising offerings, right? And some of them are much better than others. For us, video has been incredible. But we also have a lot of really top tier athletes, some of the top athletes in the world. We have one of our influencers is a 9 times games athlete, was a lot of respect in the community. We make a video with him, crushes it, right? We have some influencers with around 1 million followers that are just well known throughout the space. So, and then the thing with influencers is influencers do not sell well on their own. It's your job as the brand to take the assets that they produce and then make them convert, right? So you could have an influencer that has work with them to create a really good video that's focused on what the customers are caring about in the decision process of what product they're buying. Then you put ad spend behind that, or you put that on different platforms or on your listings or stuff like that. And then you'll see the conversion rates increase. If you're paying an influencer just to post one time and expecting this huge ROI, you're going to be greatly disappointed, right? Your job as the e-commerce entrepreneur is to take these assets and make them convert for your brand. It's not to wishfully think that some influencer is going to just post and boom, wins.
Yeah, and I guess this it very much mirrors the conversation I was having with somebody who's a sort of image marketing expert, Daisy Sepulveda, who also runs an influencer marketing agency for e-commerce sellers. And that's exactly what she's finding. She's really what they're starting to do is offer e-commerce sellers exactly what you've described to get user-generated content, whether it's an end user or created by an influencer who's basically a professional image creator of some description, and then hand that over to the marketer in order for them to use it in ads and to make sure that they've cleared all the the rights to use it in ads and all that stuff. So you're obviously ahead of the curve on that, because that's not something that many people think about. As far as I can tell, with most entrepreneurs, they seem to either run ads or reach out to influencers and hope, exactly as you said, they're going to send one, they're going to put one post up to 1 million followers somewhere. And then, of course, if it does work, and I've seen this quite a lot with my clients who've done this, it can work quite dramatically, but it's one big spike and then it's over. So for launch, that's fantastic. But for anything else, you suddenly got a stock problem, and it doesn't seem very useful to me. So tell me a bit more about you're obviously very, very strong
Well, to
at
me, that's so silly, right?
yeah.
You have a piece of content that spiked, got a bunch of sales and died off, and you sit there like, oh, it's over. Take that content and run ads behind it. You know it converts. All you got to do is give it more firepower, right? The reason it dies off is because there's no more traffic to that video. But now it's your job as the entrepreneur to get more traffic to that video, and I guess then it will work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess that sounds so obvious, but yeah, it's just beginning. The pennies begins to drop. Really, I mean, it's most people just don't do that. Right? As you said, they see influencer marketing as a sort of one-off thing, as opposed to a content creation machine that you then put your traffic behind. Or another way of putting it, perhaps, is that people see that as a solution to that dreadful traffic problem that we have, right? As any entrepreneur anywhere online, but especially e-commerce.
They see it as the solution is the influencer is going to do the work. That's not the influencer's job. Your job is to do the work. You have to get the traffic. You have to promote them. And guess what? They're going to be much more excited to work with you if they're starting to see their metrics increase because they're working with you, right? So something that a lot of influencers look for is follower and engagement, or follower count increases, engagement increases, and of course their net revenue increases, which on a lot of platforms is simply based on viewership. If you're throwing ad spend behind an ad that's converting for you, and now their brand is growing as well, they're going to be pumping a ton of content to you, probably for free at that point, right? So if you have a high value proposition to the influencer, they're going to work great. If you're sitting there hoping and praying that, they're going to just post for you and they're going to give you a lot of sales, and then you just give them, 10% of whatever you make, good luck.
Yeah, and I guess you just, in a nutshell, just described the influencer marketing model for most Amazon sellers, I guess. I mean, I say Amazon sellers, not just, but anyone who sells in e-commerce. That would explain why it doesn't work. So how much, it's hard to, this is a how long is a piece of string question, but I'll ask it and I'll see how you can answer it. How much money would you spend on ads, and how do you kind of figure out how much money to spend on that?
I mean, the easiest way to answer this is if it's profitable, spend more, right? In my opinion, if you have something that's converting profitably, there's no reason not to spend more unless you have supply chain issues or another reason that you can't sell more. So the only time we would ever not increase our advertising is if first is it's not profitable. If I'm losing money on a advertisement channel, person, campaign, whatever, as soon as I know it's not going to get any better, I'm cutting it off immediately because that's wasted money, right? As soon as it is profitable, I'll keep scaling that until it's not profitable anymore, right? I don't know what our current ad spend is right now, but we spend well over 6 figures a month in ads, but it doesn't even faze me because I know all that ad spend is profitable.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's certain times where you're going to have to spend if you have a brand new product that doesn't have a reputation, doesn't have reviews, doesn't have, any recognition, then of course it's going to start off and you're not going to be profitable from the beginning. Most likely you can be, but usually when you're first starting out, it's not profitable. But you have to be aware of those metrics, and you have to make sure that it's continuously becoming less or more and more profitable as time goes on. Otherwise, you got to cut it.
Yeah, well, it sounds again very simple, as I was saying in the last episode to you, really. So pricing power, cost of goods sold, continuous product improvements, and spend more on what's working and cut what isn't. It does sound very simple, but you're actually doing it, so you got the right to say that. The last thing I suppose you haven't really talked about much is shipping. Obviously, that's kind of related to the supply chain, but not the same thing. So, what do you do to keep your shipping costs under control in an environment where they have seem to spiral crazily?
So shipping has two sides to it. There's cost and there's speed, right? The worst thing you can do as an e-commerce entrepreneur is run out of stock. You have nothing to sell. It doesn't matter how high your shipping costs are. You don't have any revenue, right? So your number one goal is don't run out of stock. Number two is keep your shipping costs down. So the way that you can do that is a balance of different shipping methods and options. So I'm sure everyone out here is fully aware that there's multiple ways you can ship things, whether it be ground, air, sea. And within those, there's different speeds, right? You could do cargo freight, air freight, door to door, like FedEx, via air, via sea. There's the slow boat, the medium boat, and the fast boat. So what it comes down to is understanding what is the cost to do all these different shipping options, and how can you put a plan together that's utilizing the fastest shipping just to make sure you don't run out of stock, or just to launch as quickly as possible. And then getting just enough there so that when the slower, less expensive options are arriving, this is just running out of stock, right? So it just comes down to understanding all of the different options that you have, and then figuring out how to balance it for those two objectives. A, don't run out of stock, and then B, keep costs down. And I would argue for most people, running out of stock is way worse than keeping costs down. And there's ways to mitigate both.
Yeah. Okay, what are those ways?
Well, exactly that. It's balancing what am I willing to spend a higher shipping rate versus a lower shipping rate. And then as you scale, you have more negotiating power, or like you're getting a full container, you can get better rates than if you're just doing a smaller shipment where you're going to have higher rates, right? In this environment, up until now, there wasn't much pricing power that you had, just because there was so much demand, so little supply. We're seeing that shift. I mean, we're seeing the Walmart and Target put out the earnings report a few months ago, really hyped as to how inventories are rising like crazy. So they're going to have a lot less demand on shipping, which means shipping prices will be coming down over time. And again, if your shipping costs are up $1 per unit, but you can raise your price $5 a unit, no longer a concern.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the pricing power, doesn't it? I suppose that the profit equation, everyone tends to focus on the cost side as if the price is fixed. And actually, to your point of the first episode, which everyone listening really, really should check out if they haven't, is the branding that gives you the pricing power that means you can absorb a slightly higher cost. But you're interesting and rather a nice bit of good news that you're sharing, that the shipping prices are going to come down over time. That does make sense. I guess Amazon's gone from under capacity in its kind of fulfillment network as a whole, so the FCs, etc., to being over capacity now. And I guess we may finally be swinging that way with international logistics, right? Is that your take on it?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, supply, because there was always supply constraints, a lot of companies oversupplied. Demand is starting to pull back, especially because when the majority of someone's income is now having to go towards rent and gasoline. They don't have extra cash to spend on nice to haves or commodities that they just would rather buy. So demand's coming down. So that means shipping prices will come down soon. Absolutely. And if you look at someone like Tesla, I mean, what an incredible company. Their highest demand vehicle, their Model Y, they've risen the price like $16,000 or $20,000 in the last 12 months. And they still have a year wait for that vehicle in the United States, with a $20,000 increase over what it was a year ago. I mean, they're not too concerned about shipping prices.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, as you say, the biggest barrier to somebody like Tesla, and disclosure, I own a bit of Tesla stock. It's not a huge percentage of my holdings. It's more like for the roller coaster ride than anything else. It's quite exciting. But um, one of the biggest problems for them is simply getting supply. Semiconductor shortage worldwide, getting stuff out of China, really tricky with COVID, etc. I guess that's one final topic I ought to broach rather, before we move on, which is um, tell me about China and shipping. I talk about cost is one thing. If that's looking like it's come down, then the COVID lockdowns, really hard lockdowns in China, seem to have been really a problem in the last couple of months in mid 2022 that we're recording this, for actually getting hold of products in the first place. How have you been finding that, and what's your view on how that goes going forward?
So we manufacture major products outside of China. We have some products that come from China. So fortunately, we were able to avoid a lot of that by not being in China. Our factory that we don't technically own, but it's dedicated to us, is in Pakistan, and we've had much less issues, with geopolitics and everything like that. With that said, within China, we have a sourcing agent that works directly with us, and she is absolutely incredible. So during the lockdown, she was able to do a lot of things to get our products outside of the cities that were locked down to cities that were not locked down, and then get them to the ships and get them out. I think we only had like a 1 week delay beyond what would be normal due to the lockdowns, because she was able to basically rearrange where everything was coming from and how it got to the ports. So this is where a really good sourcing agent or someone who actually lives there and this is their business can be worth the weight in gold, is just handling a lot of these in-country things. So there's a lot of crappy ones out there. And finding a good sourcing agent is, somewhat skill and somewhat luck. But when you have a good one, make sure that you keep them excited to work with you. Good people are probably the most difficult part to find when building a business. So when you have the good ones, don't let them go.
Yeah. I mean, somebody who can do that, get just 1 week extra delay coming out of Shenzhen, Shanghai, whatever, any of those ports, that's an amazing result. Very impressed, even knowing nothing else about your sourcing agent. So, yeah, as you say, got to keep those people on board. That's the number one thing, isn't it? Retention of great staff. And, obviously you guys are growing and you've got a focus and a quite confidence about you, which maybe comes from sports or the military, but maybe comes from success breeding success. I don't know, but you've got that air about you that I can imagine somebody would take you seriously and wouldn't kind of think, I'm going to flake off for somebody else now. Because a lot of e-commerce business owners, to the point you were making earlier, and I've certainly been guilty of this, I have to be absolutely clear as well, that there are opportunists, and that's fine. But when you get beyond a certain point and the competition is not opportunist and is extremely focused, you're going to lose to the focus guys, right? And you're going to lose staff to them as well, which I've seen as well. Um, Listen,
Right.
really,
Well, I mean, to me, that's the biggest lesson, right? Most people
yeah,
get into this because they want money and they think it's all about me, me, me. And the first thing you need to learn when you get into business is it's not about you, it's about the customer. And as soon as you can truly make that mentorship, not just say it, but actually understand that and truly internalize that, that's when being a business owner becomes fun and its success is much easier.
yeah, I yeah, agree with that. And I guess one of the reasons, whatever I've done that actually works in the e-commerce space, I think the best success is probably the mastermind. And that's because I'm really more invested in actually caring about the clients succeeding. For example, today I took about 40 minutes to write an email. I didn't intend to take 40 minutes to one of them who's had a tough time in his business. And I thought about that after. I thought, why did I do that? I can't justify it to myself in terms of return on investment. He's already a client. He's been a client for 2 or 3 years. And I just thought, yeah, it's because I actually care that he feels better about his business. So there you go. As you say, actually caring does actually matter. And to your point, if you really, really care about your customers' outcomes, it becomes more interesting. I mean, look, all business is going to be tough at times, isn't it? I think it's worth getting hits, if you're in the fight for something you believe in, and you clearly are a massive believer in your products, and it's showing up in your business. Jason, anything else you want to add? Any other things I should have asked you about the cost control side of things?
I don't think so. I mean, again, don't overcomplicate it. I mean, you've stated that multiple times that you're like, oh, you just make it sound so simple. Well, it is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. I think too many people think simple means easy, but it doesn't. But complicated is just much more difficult than it needs to be, right? So most things in business are very simple. At the end of the day, it's you serving a customer, providing products they want, and they give you money in return. That's all there is to it. So
I
don't
love it.
overcomplicate it.
The most reductionist summary of business on the podcast so far. I think that's pretty amazing. Well, look, I don't want to mess with that lovely message, so I'm just going to say, Jason Franciosa of Element 26. I hope you sell your business for lots and lots of money because you've worked for that and you've served your customers with great passion and focus. And I'm very, very impressed. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
So, folks, that's our podcast. If you're watching this on the replay, then do pop any comments in for Jason or myself, and especially any questions as well. If I were you, if you're being smart, you'd be questioning an entrepreneur as smart as Jason, as successful as Jason. But other than that, we are going to leave you to absorb some of the wisdom that you've heard. Jason, thank you so much again for coming on.